When I saw that lens and I was holding that camera, it was the first time in my entire life that I have control over my own voice before somebody else hears it.
He's charming, articulate, and seemingly born to live inside a world of million-dollar machines. He schmoozes with supercar CEOs, gets flown to private factory tours most journalists can only dream about, and walks you through the cockpit of a Koenigsegg like he owns the place. Spoiler, he kind of does now.
Crafting your game and your passion forwards, it's not even conscious. You just do it because you're so passionate about it.
But behind the gloss, the tailored blazers, and the breathlessly cinematic drone shots, is everything really as it seems? Because for every fan who swears by James Walker, there's another corner of the internet calling him something far less flattering. Buckle up. The brand, the persona, the perfectly curated life. If you've never heard of Mr. JWW, here's the quick version. James Walker, better known as Mr. JWW, is a British automotive YouTuber who launched his channel back in 2015 with little more than an iPhone, a passion for fast cars, and a lot of patience. No fancy production setup, no massive budget, just uploads, consistency, and a serious obsession with cars. And for a while, almost nobody cared. The early years were slow, really slow. It reportedly took about 2 years of posting before the algorithm finally started giving him a break. But once it did, everything changed. Today, Mr. JWW has built a huge following, with over 1 million subscribers and hundreds of millions of views across his platforms. And his content isn't your typical quick car review filmed in a parking lot. It's polished, really polished. Think cinematic drone shots over alpine roads, ultra-clean edits, private factory tours, and access to car collections most people will only ever see through museum glass. His videos don't just show you cars, they sell you a fantasy. That fantasy is a huge part of the appeal. James presents himself as the passionate enthusiast who loved cars so much he somehow turned that obsession into a career. The guy who made it. The dream scenario every car lover secretly imagines. And for years, audiences bought into that story completely. But what makes the Mr. JWW brand so effective is that it goes beyond cars. He isn't really just selling horsepower figures, launch specs, or lap times. He's selling access. Access to wealth. Access to exclusivity. Access to a world most viewers will probably never step foot in. Because let's be honest, the average viewer is not cross-shopping a Koenigsegg and a Pagani. They're watching because it feels like a backstage pass into a very expensive universe. A simple factory tour on his channel doesn't feel like journalism. It feels personal, almost like you've somehow been invited behind the curtain. That's a powerful formula. But it also creates a problem. The more luxurious and aspirational the brand becomes, the less relatable the creator can afford to be. And viewers eventually noticed that shift. The early Mr. JWW had a rougher, more authentic energy, less polished, more enthusiast. Over time, that evolved into something far sleeker and far more corporate. Not necessarily fake, just different. Less guy filming cool cars and more luxury automotive media brand. That distinction matters. Because in the creator world, authenticity is everything. Audiences don't mind success. In fact, they usually celebrate it. But once viewers start feeling like the story is being too carefully managed, skepticism creeps in. And that's exactly what started happening with Mr. JWW. People began asking a bigger question. How much of what we're seeing is organic passion? And how much is highly curated business strategy? Because behind every beautifully shot hypercar video is a brand, and James Walker has become very, very good at building one. And once you understand that, the rest of his story starts making a lot more sense. The background. He doesn't exactly hide, but doesn't lead with either. James Walker presents himself as a passionate outsider who fell in love with cars and worked his way in, and in some ways, that's true. But calling him an outsider to the car world? That's a stretch so long it could wrap around a Nürburgring lap. His father raced in Formula Ford. His uncle was a specialist in, wait for it, Aston Martin. His grandfather sold classic cars. The man didn't stumble into a world of luxury automobiles. He was practically born behind the wheel of one. Now, is that a crime? Absolutely not. Nobody chooses their family. But here's why it matters. The "just a guy with a passion and a phone" narrative hits differently when you realize that guy grew up with a father on a race circuit and an uncle neck-deep in one of Britain's most prestigious car marques. The access, the knowledge, the vocabulary, it wasn't built from scratch. It was inherited. And then there's the business background. Before YouTube, James wasn't exactly struggling to keep the lights on. He and his family had already built and patented a business around a tan-through swimwear material, operating under companies called Koenigsegg Limited and Line Holdings. So the entrepreneurial instinct, the commercial mindset, the understanding of how to build and protect a brand, all of that existed long before a single video went live on his channel. None of this is hidden, necessarily. But it's also not what gets featured in the humble beginnings narrative. Because car kid from a racing family who already had a business background before starting YouTube doesn't quite have the same ring to it as bloke with an iPhone who made it. It's not a lie, but it's a very carefully curated version of the truth. And speaking of carefully curated, it turns out that the stunning production quality, the access to a fleet of jaw-dropping hypercars, and the sheer scale of the JWW operation, that didn't come from ad revenue alone. So who exactly is bankrolling all of this? The man behind the curtain. Meet Darren. Here's the part a lot of casual viewers miss. Mr. JWW was never really a one-man operation. From the outside, the brand looks simple. James Walker, a camera, and an enviable life surrounded by some of the rarest cars on Earth. But tucked away on the Mr. JWW website is a detail that changes how you look at the whole story. A business partner. His name is Darren. According to the site, while James is the face of the brand, Darren handles the commercial side of the business, not as a silent investor or background advisor, but as a key operational figure helping build the company behind the scenes. And suddenly, the Mr. JWW journey starts looking a little less like a typical YouTube success story and a little more like a carefully built business. Because let's be honest, most creators figure monetization out after they build an audience. Maybe they launch merch, sign sponsorships, or awkwardly squeeze Patreon plugs into their intros. Mr. JWW feels different. The structure always seemed unusually polished for what was presented as a personality-driven car channel. The partnerships came fast. The production quality scaled quickly. The access got bigger and better at an impressive rate. Before long, James wasn't just filming the hypercar world, he was deeply embedded in it. That's a major distinction. There's a difference between being invited into an exclusive space and quietly becoming part of the furniture. And that's where some viewers started feeling a little uneasy. Because once a creator becomes this commercially intertwined with the industry they cover, people naturally start asking questions. Are you still watching an independent enthusiast? Or are you watching luxury automotive marketing with a very charismatic host? That question gets even more interesting when you learn that, according to the JWW website, Darren has reportedly been supplying cars to the channel from his own collection since 2018. Not loan cars, not temporary press vehicles, personal cars, and not exactly everyday commuter vehicles either. That revelation gave online forums plenty to chew on. Users on PistonHeads began digging into the business side of the Mr. JWW brand, pointing to multiple company connections and suggesting a level of financial backing that helps explain how the channel scaled so quickly. Now, none of this is automatically suspicious. Plenty of successful creators evolve into businesses. But it does complicate the narrative. Because the Mr. JWW brand has always leaned heavily on the image of one passionate car guy building his dream from scratch. The reality seems a bit more layered than that. A visible frontman, a hidden business operator, access to serious capital and serious cars. It's not necessarily a scandal, but it is a different story than many viewers initially bought into. And once people started noticing those details, scrutiny only intensified. Because if the business structure already made some eyebrows rise, what happened next lit up the entire automotive internet. The tweet that set everything on fire. The Litchfield scandal. February 2021. And this is where things got messy. Chris Harris, respected automotive journalist, Chris Harris, presenter on Top Gear, and someone not exactly known for sugarcoating his opinions, posted a tweet that sent the automotive internet into absolute chaos. He described an unnamed influencer approaching his friend Ian Litchfield, owner of Litchfield Motors, with a proposal that raised a lot of eyebrows. According to Harris, the influencer allegedly wanted free suspension parts, a payment of £25,000 up front, and a percentage of future sales, all in exchange for featuring the company on their channel. Harris never named names. He simply ended the tweet with, "He knows who he is." And naturally, the internet did what it always does. It turned detective overnight. Around the same time, Mark Rutten from schmoozes team was also publicly complaining about a creator named James, accusing him of copying their GR Yaris project concept before allegedly making a similar pitch to Litchfield. At that point, the internet didn't exactly need a roadmap. Pretty quickly, fingers started pointing toward Mr. JWW. Then things escalated. Ian Litchfield himself publicly described the situation in blunt terms, saying his business had effectively been shaken down. According to him, what started as a normal collaboration discussion gradually snowballed into a far more aggressive commercial ask. Free parts, cash, and a revenue share. Not exactly subtle. James Walker responded quickly with a statement denying direct involvement. He claimed he had not personally contacted Litchfield, and that an agency working on his behalf had handled those conversations. He also said discussions were already underway before the situation was framed publicly as a cold approach. In other words, not my wording, not my negotiation. He admitted that commercial partnerships are part of how his business operates, but insisted these deals are intended to be mutually beneficial. And to be fair, Harris never explicitly named him. But by then, the damage was already done. Because internet controversies aren't always decided by facts alone. They're decided by optics. And the optics here? Brutal. You had Chris Harris publicly signaling disapproval. You had Ian Litchfield, a respected name in tuning circles, using language like shaken down. And you had already skeptical car communities treating the whole situation as confirmation of long-held suspicions. That was the real issue. This scandal didn't create criticism around Mr. JWW. It concentrated it. Suddenly, every existing complaint came rushing back to the surface. Too polished, too commercial, too brand-focused, too carefully managed. In enthusiast communities, authenticity is sacred. Viewers can tolerate wealth, ego, even a little flexing. What they struggle to forgive is the feeling that passion might just be packaging for a business machine. And that's exactly what this controversy tapped into. The debate quickly stopped being about suspension parts or sponsorship pricing. It became a bigger question. Was Mr. JWW really the passionate car enthusiast people thought he was? Or had he quietly become something much more corporate? The truth is probably somewhere in the middle. Maybe James didn't personally make every demand, but the agency represented his business, and his brand was at the center of it. Fair or not, most people decided that was enough. And yet, instead of disappearing after the backlash, James did something almost nobody expected. He got even bigger. The £30 million claim: influence or inflated ego. Before we get to what came next, there's a boast sitting right on the Mr. JWW website that deserves its own spotlight. According to his partnerships page, backed, it says, by Koenigsegg UK, James Walker influenced over £30 million in UK Koenigsegg sales. £30 million. Off the back of YouTube videos. Now, Koenigsegg does confirm this partnership, and the case study is cited directly. But the claim itself is eyebrow-raising. The methodology for attributing that kind of figure to a content creator is notoriously murky. How do you prove that a viewer watched a YouTube video and then bought a £2 million hypercar? Is it self-reported data? Dealer attribution? Brand sentiment surveys? Nobody's exactly publishing the receipts. The claim serves a very specific purpose. It makes James and his commercial rates look extraordinarily valuable to potential brand partners. If you can tell a luxury car brand that you moved £30 million in units, that justifies premium pricing for access. That justifies $25,000 deals. That justifies the commercial machine that got him into so much trouble with Litchfield in the first place. Critics on Piston Heads and beyond have called the whole JWW operation a calculated exercise in perception management, noting that he makes sure he words most things very cleverly to give an impression that may well not be what it seems. And that's coming from people who spend their weekends reading car forums. Not exactly a disengaged audience. Is the £30 million claim true? Possibly. Partially. In some versions of the accounting. But it's also the kind of number that exists to impress, to justify, and to close deals. And that's a very different use of influence than the pure, passion-driven content creation the JWW brand likes to trade on. So after the shakedown scandal, after the £30 million flex, after the questions about whose cars, whose money, and whose deals, what did James Walker do? He opened a Koenigsegg dealership. Koenigsegg London. Passion project or power move? In May 2023, James Walker announced something that made even his loudest critics do a double-take. He and his business partner were opening Koenigsegg London, the UK's first official standalone showroom for the Swedish hypercar brand. Not a pop-up, not a temporary partnership, a real dealership. In Kensington, no less, one of London's most expensive postcodes. By March 2024, the showroom was open, fully operational, sleek, polished, legitimate. And that's where the Mr. JWW story gets harder to dismiss. Because for years, critics accused James of being all smoke, mirrors, and cinematic luxury cosplay. But this? You can't fake this level of access. You don't accidentally become an official Koenigsegg dealer. You don't just wander into a franchise agreement with one of the most exclusive car manufacturers on Earth. At some point, this stopped being just YouTube. Even more significantly, Christian von Koenigsegg personally backed the move. That's a serious endorsement. Whatever people think of James Walker, Koenigsegg clearly sees value in him, not just as a creator, but as a business partner. Still, the move created a whole new layer of controversy, because Mr. JWW built his audience on a very specific promise. One passionate enthusiast sharing his love for incredible cars. But now, he's not just reviewing Koenigseggs. He's literally selling them, and that changes the dynamic. When James uploads a glowing video about a Koenigsegg now, viewers can't help but ask, is this genuine enthusiasm, or is this basically a beautifully shot sales pitch? That's the awkward tension at the heart of all this. Before opening the dealership, James claimed he had already influenced over £30 million in Koenigsegg sales through his platform. Now, if those same customers buy through Koenigsegg London, he profits directly. The lines between content creator, influencer, and salesman have officially blurred into one expensive Swedish carbon fiber soup. And then there's the timing. The previous UK Koenigsegg dealer, Supercar, appeared to quietly fade from the spotlight around the same time Koenigsegg London emerged. Nothing dramatic was publicly announced, but online communities definitely noticed. That only fueled the narrative that James wasn't just reviewing the luxury car world anymore, he was strategically positioning himself inside it. And honestly, that may be the most impressive part of the whole story. James Walker started as a guy filming cars he admired. Years later, he's co-running a luxury dealership selling some of the rarest machines on the planet. That's either a wildly impressive success story or the most elegant long-term business play automotive YouTube has ever seen. Maybe both. That's what makes Mr. JWW such a polarizing figure. He's too commercially successful now to still feel like the relatable car guy with an iPhone from the early days. But he's also too knowledgeable and clearly passionate to write off as just another shallow influencer in designer loafers. He exists somewhere in the middle. Not purely journalist, not purely businessman, not purely content creator. Something more modern, more calculated. And maybe that's the real lesson here. In today's internet economy, influence is often more valuable than ownership. Until eventually, if you play the game well enough, influence turns into ownership. Scandals usually leave dents. For James Walker, they somehow became acceleration. So was Koenigsegg London the natural next step for a genuine enthusiast? Or the final evolution of a carefully built luxury brand? Honestly, that depends on how much of Mr. JWW you believe was ever just about the cars. So, there it is. The full picture of Mr. JWW, the privileged upbringing he undersells, the hidden backer nobody talks about, the shakedown scandal that Chris Harris lit the match on, the £30 million claim nobody can fully verify, and the Koenigsegg dealership that blurs every line between creator and seller. James Walker isn't a villain. But he's not quite the self-made everyman either. He lives deliberately, profitably, in the gray. And next week, we're going after another automotive icon with secrets just as deep. Don't miss it.